High above the forest floor, where light filters through a cathedral of leaves, a different kind of life begins. In the canopies of ancient jungles, entire communities have learned to dwell where the roots never reach, among the branches, above the clouds, beneath the gaze of birds. These are the tree people. For generations, they've carved out a home in the treetops, building shelters on stilts, swinging bridges across the green void, and walking paths known only to their ancestors. Rain drums on the leaves. This is a journey into the skies of the jungle, where culture, survival, and nature meet in a world suspended above the earth. Korowai, hidden deep in the lowland rainforests of southeastern Papua, the Korowai people have built a world that hovers far above the ground. Among towering trees and tangled roots, they raise their homes high in the canopy, perched atop wooden stilts that reach into the mist. These treetop dwellings, crafted from sago palm and jungle timber, are not only shelters but lifelines, lifted above floodwaters, away from insects, and out of reach of danger. The Korowai were largely isolated from the outside world until the 1970s. For generations before that, they lived with minimal contact beyond their clans, sustaining themselves through a complex web of forest knowledge. The sago tree remains central to their diet, its pulp extracted and baked into flat cakes. They fish with handmade spears, hunt with bows, and gather wild fruits in silence, moving through the undergrowth with the memory of 1,000 steps passed down through lineage. In Korowai belief systems, the forest is alive. Spirits dwell in the trees, ancestors linger in the wind, and the lines between the natural and supernatural blur. Rituals mark the passage of life and death, and oral histories keep the memory of each clan alive. Every house in the sky is more than a structure. It is a monument to survival, a symbol of knowledge carried upward through time. Their stilted architecture reaches as high as the surrounding treetops, with access by vine ladders and notched poles. Entire families live in these homes, working, sleeping, and watching the forest below. From above, the view is not just of nature, but of a culture rooted in resilience. Today, as the outside world edges closer and modernization threatens the forest, some Korowai have moved to government settlements. Yet in the heart of the jungle, among the branches and birdsong, many still cling to the treetop life, a world of tradition raised high above the forest floor, untouched by concrete and still held by wood and sky. Bayaka. Beneath the vast green roof of the Congo Basin, where sunlight filters in soft fragments and vines stretch toward the sky, the Bayaka people have lived in rhythm with the rainforest for generations. Known for their deep knowledge of the forest's secrets, the Bayaka do not build homes in the treetops, but their lives unfold beneath its towering canopy, a cathedral of trees that shelters, feeds, and protects. The Bayaka are semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers whose traditions trace back thousands of years. They move lightly through the forest, setting up temporary huts from leaves and saplings, and returning to familiar grounds in cycles shaped by the seasons. Their skills are passed down by demonstration, not by books. Every child learns to climb trees for honey, to listen for the movement of animals, and to find medicinal roots buried beneath the moss. Music is at the heart of Bayaka identity. Polyphonic singing drifts through the trees like wind, echoing in harmonies that carry both celebration and prayer. Instruments are carved from the forest itself. Water drums, flutes, and wooden percussions tuned to the pulse of the earth. Each song is a story, and each voice holds memory. The Bayaka's connection to the trees is intimate. They scale trunks with ease, tracking bees to hidden hives, harvesting fruits high in the canopy, and using bark, resin, and leaves for food, healing, and ritual. The forest is not a backdrop. It is the source of all meaning, every plant and animal, part of a system they have studied longer than any outsider. But the silence of the forest grows thinner. Logging roads creep closer. Outside forces threaten the ecosystem that cradles their world. Still, the Bayaka remain, holding tight to a life where knowledge is lived, not written, and the trees are more than timber. They are the memory of the land, standing tall as witness to a people whose spirit rises with the forest itself. Baka. In the dense rainforests of southeastern Cameroon, the Baka people live beneath a canopy that stretches endlessly above, its branches thick with vines, orchids, and the weight of rain. This forest is not a barrier, but a homeland. Every path, every echo, every rustle in the leaves is understood. The Baka have lived here for centuries, their culture rooted in the soil, their lives unfolding beneath the towering trees. The Baka are skilled hunter-gatherers, with an ancestral knowledge of the forest that defies written records. They build lightweight, circular huts from leaves and branches, quickly constructed and easily moved as they follow the cycles of ripening fruit and animal migrations. Children learn early to climb trees for honey, to track antelope in silence, to read the forest's signs as if it speaks a language only they can hear. Music and ritual run deep in Baka life. In the evenings, voices rise in polyphonic layers, creating a soundscape that mirrors the depth of the forest. Ceremonial dances pay tribute to forest spirits, while elders pass down sacred knowledge through song and myth. The forest is not just a place to live, it is a living being, a spirit-bearing world that feeds, shelters, and guides. High in the trees, the Baka harvest honey from wild hives, using smoke to calm bees and vines to scale trunks. They collect medicinal plants from high branches and fruits hidden in the treetops. The forest offers everything: tools, food, shelter, even identity. In return, the Baka treat it with reverence, never taking more than they need. But the outside world pushes in. Logging, displacement, and changing policies threaten the balance. Still, within the forest's hush, the Baka continue their way of life. They remain guardians of a world many will never see, their steps soft, their presence nearly invisible, their bond with the forest written in the rustle of leaves and the shadows cast by towering trees above. Mbuti Ituri Forest. In the heart of the Ituri forest, where light barely touches the earth and the canopy stretches like a living ceiling, the Mbuti people have shaped a life bound entirely to the rhythm of the trees. Among the oldest forest-dwelling communities in Central Africa, the Mbuti live not beneath the forest, but within it, inside its breath, its heartbeat, its memory. The Mbuti are expert foragers, hunters and storytellers. Their homes, woven from branches and broad leaves, are nestled beneath the trees that have sheltered their ancestors for generations. They do not cultivate fields or build permanent settlements. Instead, they follow the forest's cycles, knowing when fruit ripens in the canopy and where herds of antelope will pass. Their knowledge is precise, shaped not by maps or measurements, but by centuries of lived experience. Tree climbing is part of daily life. Men and boys ascend with ease to smoke out beehives or gather fruits high above the ground. Women forage for mushrooms and roots beneath the towering trunks, listening for subtle changes in the forest's sounds. The warnings of birds, the whisper of leaves, the movements of game. The Mbuti speak of the forest as mother and father, as spirit and shelter. In their worldview, everything is connected. Rituals are held beneath sacred trees, and songs rise at dusk, layered and rhythmic, calling out to the unseen. The Molimo ceremony, one of their most sacred traditions, is performed to restore harmony when the balance of life is disturbed, often involving music that echoes like the voice of the forest itself. Their lives, however, are increasingly challenged. Encroachment from agriculture, logging, and armed conflict threatens both the land and the culture it sustains. Yet the Mbuti endure, moving through the trees with quiet precision, holding to a way of life that honors the ancient bond between humans and forest. In the filtered twilight beneath the canopy, they remain as they have always been, children of the trees, keepers of the green world, living in harmony with a forest that breathes with them. Tawi-Tawi Bajau. In the southernmost islands of the Philippines, where sea and forest intertwine, the Bajau of Tawi-Tawi have created a way of life shaped by movement, tide, and shelter. Known widely as sea nomads, some Bajau families have built their homes not only above the ocean, but also in the trees, modest wooden shacks raised on stilts amid coastal forests, where mangroves and palms form a bridge between land and water. These treetop shelters, often overlooking inlets and coral bays, are crafted from bamboo, palm thatch, and salvaged timber. Elevated above the marsh and saltwater, they offer refuge from storms and floods. For generations, Bajau families have climbed these platforms to rest, store nets, dry fish, and find a moment of stillness between journeys. The tree becomes part of the architecture, not just support, but sanctuary. The Bajau are famed for their deep-sea diving, their ability to navigate vast stretches of ocean without maps, and their craftsmanship in boat building. Yet, in places like Tawi-Tawi, where land is scarce and tides unpredictable, they have also adapted to the forest edge. Their relationship with trees is practical, shaped by necessity, but it reflects the same principles that guide their life at sea: balance, precision, and respect for nature's forces. Children learn early to climb. They gather coconuts, scout for birds' nests, and play in the canopies, while elders mend nets in the shade below. Daily life unfolds in layers: sea below, shelter above, sky beyond. From these simple shacks nestled in the treetops, families watch over their boats, their children, and the changing light of the horizon. Today, modernization and territorial restrictions place pressure on Bajau ways of life. But in the hidden pockets of Tawi-Tawi, some still live as they always have, between sea and forest, dwelling in tree-bound shelters that rise quietly above the tide, shaped by the rhythm of water and the silence of wood. Huli Wigmen. In the mist-covered highlands of Papua New Guinea, the land rises into a mosaic of steep ridges and forested valleys. Here, in the heart of this rugged terrain, live the Huli Wigmen, one of the country's most visually striking and culturally distinct communities. While their villages cluster along the mountain slopes, scattered among the trees are elevated wooden lookout huts, built high above the ground, used for protection, observation, and ritual. These tree hut structures, lashed together with vine rope and perched on stilts or suspended within trunks, serve as strategic vantage points. From here, men watch for signs of movement, friend or foe, human or animal, across the valley floor. In times of tribal tension, these platforms act as early warning stations. In peacetime, they are a place of reflection, storytelling, and connection to the forest canopy. The Huli are known for their elaborate wigs made from human hair, adorned with feathers and flowers, worn during ceremonies and rites of passage. These rituals often take place near the forest's edge, where spirits are believed to dwell, and where treetop huts serve both symbolic and functional roles. The trees are seen as both physical and spiritual pillars, holding up not only the sky, but the structure of Huli belief. For the Huli, the forest is more than a backdrop. It is a living world that offers shelter, knowledge, and spiritual power. Boys are initiated in isolation, often in remote tree huts, where they learn to mimic birds, survive in the bush, and prepare for adulthood. These elevated spaces become thresholds between youth and manhood, between the ground and the sky, between the human and the ancestral. Though modern roads and influences now reach deeper into the highlands, many Huli still hold tightly to tradition. The tree hut lookout remains, not as a relic, but as a living part of their cultural landscape, standing among the branches, woven into the story of a people who watch from above, who listen to the forest, and who rise always from the roots of the mountain trees. Agta people. In the mountain forests of northeastern Luzon, the Agta people have lived for centuries beneath the vast canopy of tropical trees. Among the oldest forest-dwelling communities in the Philippines, their culture remains closely tied to the rhythms of the land. In areas where terrain becomes steep and the forest thickens, the Agta construct elevated shelters, small wooden huts perched on trees or raised platforms, lifted above the forest floor to protect against wild animals and floods, and to keep food and family dry in the long rainy season. Traditionally semi-nomadic, the Agta rely on hunting, fishing, and gathering for sustenance. Men climb trees with ease, searching for honey in wild hives or scouting game from above. Bows and arrows are crafted from forest wood. Women forage for edible roots and fruits, often with children trailing quietly behind. Life is mobile, light, and deeply embedded in the ecosystem. Tree shelters provide a practical solution to the challenges of forest life. Built from bamboo, hardwood, and palm leaves, these structures are temporary but essential. Some are used for overnight stays while hunting or traveling through the jungle. Others serve as lookout posts or quiet places for ritual and rest. Suspended above ground, they offer both visibility and solitude, allowing the Agta to move freely through the dense interior without building permanent villages. The Agta see the forest as a living world. Spirits dwell in trees, and certain groves are avoided out of respect. Oral traditions preserve the laws of the land, stories of ancestors, animals, and hidden dangers that pass from elder to child. Songs rise during evening gatherings, echoing beneath the high canopy. In recent years, the Agta way of life has come under threat. Logging, land disputes, and government pressures have pushed some families out of the forest. But in the remote corners of Luzon, among the trees that rise like columns of memory, some Agta still climb, still hunt, and still rest in huts that float quietly among the leaves, high above the earth, held in the arms of the forest that has shaped them for generations. Batak tribe. In the forested foothills of northern Palawan, where mountain streams cut through thick jungle and birdsong echoes beneath the canopy, the Batak tribe continues a way of life shaped by the land. Among bamboo groves and hardwood trees, the Batak build elevated huts, simple structures lifted off the ground, resting on wooden stilts or nestled into sloped hillsides where the forest climbs toward the sky. These homes, often constructed with nipa palm and tree trunks, offer protection from insects, flooding, and wild animals. Raised platforms serve not just as dwellings, but as spaces for rest, storytelling, and preparation of forest harvests. The height is practical, but also symbolic, a step closer to the forest spirits that dwell in the trees, and a constant reminder of the Batak's bond with the highland wilderness that surrounds them. As one of the oldest indigenous groups in the Philippines, the Batak are skilled foragers and cultivators. They gather resin, honey, rattan, and medicinal plants from the canopy. Men scale trees in search of fruit and wild hives, while women collect tubers and herbs from shaded forest trails. Every movement through the jungle is informed by tradition, every plant identified through generations of memory. Their spiritual life is woven tightly with the forest. The Batak believe that nature is alive with unseen forces. Ritual offerings are placed at the base of sacred trees, and ceremonies are held to seek permission from the spirits before gathering resources. The elevated huts, surrounded by jungle sounds, become places not only of shelter, but of communion with the world above and around. The Batak face growing pressure from deforestation, development, and outside influence. As roads cut through Palawan's interior, their access to ancestral lands has grown uncertain. Yet in the upland forests where the air is cool and the trees rise unbroken, many Batak families still live in harmony with the land, in huts lifted by wood, guided by knowledge, and surrounded by a forest that has always cradled their history among the treetops. Penan people. In the shadowed rainforests of northern Borneo, where tangled vines and towering dipterocarps form an endless ceiling of green, the Penan people have lived for centuries in harmony with one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth. Traditionally nomadic, the Penan move through the forest with quiet purpose, building raised shelters from jungle materials, perched on hillsides or supported by stilts to avoid floods and forest insects. These lightweight homes, often framed by bamboo and thatch, sit just above the ground or nestled beside trees, designed for mobility and protection beneath the canopy. The Penan are master trackers, their knowledge of the rainforest passed down through whispered instruction and careful observation. They hunt with blowpipes tipped with poisoned darts, and they gather wild sago, fruits, and medicinal plants high in the forest. Climbing trees for honey or birds' eggs is part of daily life, as is reading the subtle language of leaves, footprints, and bird calls. Their shelters reflect this way of life, functional, adaptable, and always close to the trees that sustain them. While they do not build towering homes in the branches, their structures rise slightly above the jungle floor, offering a higher vantage point in the dense undergrowth. These platforms are gathering spaces where families rest, children learn, and elders share stories of the forest's sacred places. Deeply spiritual, the Penan view the rainforest as a living being. Certain trees are considered guardians, and rivers are believed to hold ancestral power. They follow a code of behavior called molong, which teaches respect and restraint, never taking more than needed, always thinking of others. This principle shapes every hunt, every harvest, every shelter built among the trees. In recent decades, logging and deforestation have pushed many Penan into fixed settlements. But even as the modern world encroaches, the heart of their culture remains rooted in the forest. Where old paths still wind beneath towering branches, and where shelters still rise above the ferns and mud, the Penan continue to live by the wisdom of the trees, quietly, skillfully, in a world where every leaf has meaning and every breath carries the memory of the jungle. Mentawai people. Off the western coast of Sumatra, surrounded by the crashing surf of the Indian Ocean, lies Siberut Island, a land of deep jungle, winding rivers, and towering tropical trees. In this remote landscape, the Mentawai people have lived for generations, in homes raised high on wooden stilts, woven tightly into the rhythms of forest, sky, and ancestral spirit. Their traditional houses, called uma, stand elevated above the jungle floor, supported by thick tree trunks, carved and bound with fibre and vine. These structures are long, spacious, and built communally, sheltering extended families beneath one roof. Raised above the damp earth, the uma offers protection from flooding and crawling insects, but it also connects the Mentawai to the towering trees that surround them. Suspended in the forest air, these homes exist in a space between earth and canopy, shaped by centuries of ritual and design. The Mentawai are semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers and cultivators. They move through the forest barefoot and with ease, climbing trees for coconuts, fruits, and medicinal leaves, or tracking pigs and monkeys through dense undergrowth. They use hand-carved tools, blowpipes, and traditional knives to gather what they need. Every element of the forest is known, not just as a resource, but as a being. The forest is alive with spirits, and each tree holds its own presence. Tattooed from a young age, the Mentawai wear their identity on their skin. Their bodies are marked with lines that signify strength, harmony, and connection to nature. Shamans, known as sikare, perform rituals in elevated spaces where smoke rises through the open rafters and chants drift into the leaves. In the Uma, animal skulls hang from beams, sacred objects rest on carved platforms, and fires glow in the shadowed corners of wooden walls. Though modernization has begun to reach Cyberroot's shores, many Mentawai still cling to the old ways. In villages deep in the forest, where stilted houses stand among palm groves and tree roots, the culture endures, a life raised above the ground, protected by wood, guided by spirit, and forever woven into the towering green of the island's trees. Bagobo. In the highlands of southeastern Mindanao, where mountain ridges fold into valleys draped in mist, the Bagobo people have long preserved a culture shaped by altitude, forest, and ancestral tradition. Their villages rest along the slopes and foothills, surrounded by dense tropical trees and thick vegetation. In this elevated world, Bagobo homes are built on tall wooden stilts, structures designed to rise above the earth, protect from flooding, and harmonize with the natural terrain. These stilted houses, crafted from bamboo, timber, and nipa palm, echo the verticality of the forest itself. Beneath the raised floor, pigs and chickens roam. Above, families gather around hearths, their voices mingling with the distant calls of birds hidden in the canopy. The space between ground and shelter reflects more than practicality. It signifies balance between the human and the spiritual, the visible and the unseen. Traditionally, the Bagobo practiced a blend of farming, hunting, and forest gathering. Their ancestors moved with the forest's cycles, climbing trees for fruit, resin, and firewood. The towering trunks of the rainforest offered more than sustenance. They served as silent witnesses to rituals and rites, to stories passed from elder to youth beneath their shade. Forest trails, known only to local memory, connected upland settlements through corridors of green. Bagobo spirituality is rooted in the land. Sacred groves and high places are home to spirits, and offerings are made to ancestral beings who guide and guard the people. Their textiles, woven by hand and dyed with natural pigments, carry patterns inspired by trees, mountains, and sky. The house on stilts becomes a sacred space, a shelter that listens, a stage for ceremony, a vessel for memory. As modern infrastructure advances and lowland expansion grows, many Bagobo communities face pressure to adapt. Yet in the uplands of Mindanao, where the trees still rise tall and the wind carries the scent of rain and soil, the Bagobo way of life continues. Elevated above the forest floor, held together by tradition and timber, their stilted homes remain. A quiet symbol of survival and a deep-rooted connection to the treetop world they have always called home. Chimbu people. High in the central spine of Papua New Guinea, where jagged peaks pierce the clouds and valleys plunge into green obscurity, the Chimbu people have carved out their existence along sheer mountain slopes. In these dramatic highlands, villages cling to hillsides so steep that trees become more than part of the landscape. They become anchors, stairways, and lifelines. Many Chimbu homes are built with access routes that weave through trunks, climb over roots, and rise through branches, creating paths where the forest itself becomes a passageway between the earth and shelter. The houses, constructed from woven cane, grass, and highland timber, rest on uneven terrain, supported by poles driven deep into the slope. In some settlements, narrow log ladders lean against trunks, guiding villagers from one elevation to another.